In today's video, I'm going to share something that is quite controversial. You're either going to love it or hate it. I'm going to tell you why your child is autistic. This is what behavioral specialists, conventional practitioners, and pediatricians are not going to tell you. It is not just genetic. It is so much more than that. And this is actually why we're seeing people recover from autism. Even young children losing their autism diagnosis. This is actually where I'm going to prove to you that healing autism is possible. In this video, I'm going to share the real root cause of autism. We're going to explain how genetics play a role in someone's autism diagnosis, and also how, more importantly, the gut microbiome and toxicity play a role. We're going to dive a little deep into the science behind all of this. And in the end of this video, I'm going to give you the most practical thing you can do to start reversing autism today. And if you suspect that you might be slightly on the spectrum, how you can actually reverse generational cycles of autism if it quote unquote runs in your family and you actually want to put an end to it. So let's jump in. What is autism? So Google will define autism as autism spectrum disorder, ASD. It is a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by differences in social communication and interaction, along with restricted or repeated behaviors, interests, or activities. So let's first address the biggest misconception out there, and that is that it is genetic. There is actually no gene that has been found for autism. So far, that's not a thing. So similar to other chronic illnesses like autoimmunity, gut issues, there's really no gene that turns these sort of things on and off. If there were, that would also be a factor of epigenetics, in which case I would actually argue that you can turn those genes on and off, but there's actually no gene that has been found for autism. Therefore, I believe autism is a product of an internal and an external environment. And I'm going to explain more of what I mean by that in a minute. I believe when you look at the root cause of autism, you're going to see that the root causes of these issues accumulate over generations. So this is why you see cycles of it in certain families, or maybe autism getting worse and worse as generations go down. A parent might have mild Asperger's, whereas their child might actually end up with a very severe case of autism presenting many of the symptoms. So what is the root cause of autism? I believe that it is your microbiome and toxicity. And the reason you see these patterns in families is because your gut microbiome and your toxic load get passed down generation after generation. It actually will accumulate in the body. So if it is a healthy microbiome, you will pass on a healthy gut microbiome to your children. If you have a low toxic burden, you're not passing on very much toxins to your children. But if you have a high toxic load and you've got a really damaged microbiome, then you're passing that all onto your children. This doesn't just present as autism. Often it can present any variety of gut imbalances, autoimmunity, or even cancer. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that on this platform, but what's really getting passed down isn't the disease, it's actually the root cause of the disease, which is the microbiome and the toxicity. Now, here's how it starts. I think that any sort of disease in our modern world is going to be driven primarily by toxicity, whether that be through chemical exposure, heavy metal exposure, environmental toxins, contaminants. It could be anything from your water being contaminated all the way down to where you grew up in mold, a lead poisoned home, or even that you just grew up around a body of water that was severely contaminated. What happens then is these toxins go into our body and they actually get stored in our body. Often they get stored in our fat. Our body is always trying to get rid of them. It's always trying to process them. But because we live in a day and age where there's just so many toxins, what ends up happening is our body has to compensate for them. So you've got this high toxic load, and what follows that is that the pathogens in your body will start to overgrow to consume these toxins. They act as the cleanup crew. So if you have an overgrowth of said bad bacteria, what I know right off the bat is that you've got a high toxic load. And so that needs to be a big portion of how you actually work to recover that issue. This is similar to what happens in soils. This actually happens in bodies of water. If there's any sort of contamination in the soil, the microbes in the soil will actually overgrow to compensate for it. And actually heavy levels of contamination, you're also going to see higher pathogen counts in the soil. Pathogenic microbes overgrow to compensate for toxicity in the environment. So this means yeast, parasites, bacteria, other forms of fungi are going to overgrow. They're going to act as the cleanup crew. They have a function in your gut, and they're going to overgrow to eat up the toxins in your body. This is actually your body's beautiful design, because that means that these toxins are not going to other more important areas of the body, like your vital organs, like your brain and your heart. And so it's actually a really beautiful adaptation. But when it is being forced in such large amounts, this is when you start seeing symptoms. To narrow in on just for a minute. This is just one of the areas that toxicity comes from. I think people are so obsessed with shots causing autism, and very likely it is a leading contributor. But the reason for that really comes down to the toxicity that is inside of the a microbiome that is already depleted and on a body that is already toxic. If you can think of your body's toxic load as sort of like a bucket, if your bucket is already at the brim because, your mom passed down lots of toxins from her body, your dad had lots of toxins in their body, maybe you were exposed to something in your environment, so you've got lots of mold in your environment, maybe you have eaten food that has pesticides on it and you've got lots of heavy metals in your environment, your bucket is already up to here. So the second you get you are basically overflowing the bucket and you're seeing symptoms that oftentimes people are attributing just to that one. Well, it's not just it's all of the toxicity that's been leading up to that. It's the generations of people who have had. And that's leading to this toxic load in your body that is so overloaded to the point where people can get one and have debilitating symptoms for the rest of their life if they don't deal with it. This is also why some people don't have any symptoms from it, because some people might actually have a low toxic load, and so adding a little bit in doesn't show directly as tons of different symptoms. I know this is a controversial topic. Please do your research. If you are considering taking any of those things, adding anything into your body that is a foreign substance, just consider looking at the ingredient label and looking up what those ingredients do to the body, what amounts are approved, and please consider what those could potentially be doing to your body and your microbiome. That's all I'm going to say on that. So now we have a state where there's so much toxicity and there's now so many pathogens that are overgrowing to compensate for this toxicity, and there is an imbalance of gut bacteria as a result. You've got too much bad and not enough good bacteria. This is actually where leaky gut originally comes from, is these pathogens will actually break holes in the intestinal lining. This is when you start to see your immune system overreact because your gut is leaky and all the toxins and food and undigested particles can basically just enter into your bloodstream. But yeast in particular, so yeast is a form of fungi, can actually stretch its tentacles through the digestive tract, will actually trigger even worse leaky gut than is probably already there. And this yeast acts as a major component of the cleanup crew. So yeast like candida is often what you see in really high amounts for kids with autism. So now you've got lots of pathogens, lots of toxins that are being eaten up by the pathogens, and you've got holes in the digestive lining. This is the root problem behind autism. Now, I want to explain here how it actually affects the brain. First of all, the extreme amount of toxicity in the body not only will seep through the leaky gut into the bloodstream, which then crosses the blood-brain barrier. And so those toxins have a direct impact on the brain. These toxins can be known neurotoxins like formaldehyde and lead and mercury, which you find in the package inserts of a lot of these shops. But it can also be anything like chemicals from your cleaning products or pesticides on the inorganic produce that you're buying. Those things can actually pass through the blood-brain barrier and into your brain and actually affect neurodevelopment. So that's one. But here's the kicker. All of these pathogenic bacteria that have overgrown, they have no beneficial species to keep them in check, or very little beneficial bacteria to keep them in check. Ideally, you've got a large amount of beneficial bacteria and a small amount of pathogenic bacteria, and that is where you can kind of keep this homeostasis, this balance. We're not even looking for no pathogenic bacteria. We just want it to be in balance. But when you have such high proportions of the pathogenic bacteria with not enough of the beneficial, these pathogens are able to grow and grow and grow, growing so big and so out of control and disproportionate to the beneficial. They do something that is really key here, and this is why people present with symptoms. They will exhale over 176 different toxic gases into the body, into the bloodstream. This goes straight to the brain. It can go all throughout the body, but it can go straight to the brain, causing neurological symptoms. That is often the reason why kids will get diagnosed with not just ASD, but also ADHD and potentially even schizophrenia and bipolar and all of these kind of conglomeration of basically groupings of symptoms, because the real root cause is these toxic gases that are influencing the entire brain. The specific toxic gases that are the most problematic for people with ASD are ethanol, which is off-gassed by candida, and acetaldehyde, which is a byproduct of ethanol. Dr. Natasha's clinical work with autism spectrum individuals found high levels of these two toxic gases in their system. So she concluded that these pathogens, these yeast, these parasites, pathogenic forms of bacteria, off gas, ethanol and acetaldehyde, and it goes straight into the bloodstream and is able to cross that blood-brain barrier. This is why you see symptoms. To be clear here, ethanol is alcohol. So I want to read this quote. She says, in healthy individuals, dietary glucose gets converted to lactic acid, water, and energy through a biochemical process called glycolysis. In people with yeast overgrowth, candida hijacks the glucose and digests it in a different way called alcoholic fermentation. In this biochemical process, candida and other yeasts convert dietary glucose, so sugar, into alcohol, which is ethanol, and its byproduct, acetaldehyde. Ethanol is a clear, colorless liquid that rapidly absorbs into the GI tract, distributes throughout the whole body. It is literally a topical disinfectant, so you can imagine all of the symptoms. I'm going to kind of go into how that relates to all of the symptoms. It's also a solvent, and it's also a preservative used in pharmaceuticals. It is a very small molecule, meaning that it is able to cross through any kind of barrier in the body, particularly the blood-brain barrier, and it causes havoc all throughout the body, as would sitting down and sipping on some wine every single day, all day long. Like, that would cause problems throughout the entire body. But as an example, this alcohol through the body affects not only your gut microbiome, it can actually influence, again, that balance of gut flora, but it will lower stomach acid. Lowering the stomach acid is going to cause more pathogens to overgrow because the acidic stomach is what we need for a balanced microbiome. It's going to reduce pancreatic enzymes. This can also lead to diabetes. It can cause leaky gut, which we're going to come back to here in a minute when I give you solutions for all of this. It can lead to deficiencies in vitamin A and B, decreased immune function, and a huge one is liver damage. It depletes glutathione. It can cause brain damage, peripheral nerve damage, muscle weakness, and direct muscle tissue damage. And like I said, ethanol is directly related to fatty liver disease. So this is something that you see with like alcoholics, but you may not be realizing it. The body of autistic individuals, I would argue even people with other illnesses as well, is basically creating this constant steady flow of alcohol, which is damaging all these different systems in the body. So for autistic individuals, when they eat sugar, the sugar will feed the yeast. They aren't drinking alcohol, but the sugar kickstarts this sort of alcoholic fermentation process in the gut, which can actually cause symptoms similar to what you would see when somebody is drunk. Because when your brain is exposed to a constant steady flow of alcohol, it only makes sense that they experience these sort of brain-related neurological symptoms. So the crazy thing about this is even carbs will do this because carbs translate to sugar in the body. But this is where you get autistic individuals acting very violent, sometimes with these really big violent outbursts, having really picky eating. I'm going to go deeper into that in a second, but their bodies want the sugar to continue on this process. They might have tics. They might get diarrhea, they might get constipation, they might get bloated. They're going to see symptoms potentially of like a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic, because of their insulin spikes and their inability to kind of regulate their pancreatic enzymes. You might see sleep disturbances because your sleep is so much determined by your blood sugar. And this is where the slurring of speech, the forgetfulness, the inability to pronounce words properly, it's literally the effects of alcohol in the system. Inability to focus, maybe they're stumbling. They might even be like walking a little bit like a drunk person. Some individuals will actually act sort of slap happy in this state. They act like really hyper in this state. And all of this is the influence of those toxic gases and specifically ethanol. This leads me to my next point is that yeast control your taste buds. So if you have an autistic child and you've ever wondered why they crave carbs so much, crackers, sugar, like that all they'll eat is like candy and bread. They won't eat protein. They'll reject a lot of the more nourishing foods. The reason is because yeast end up actually controlling their taste buds. When your body craves something similar to how an addict would crave something, and obviously it's different, but it is actually very similar. Their body has actually become addicted to this alcoholic substance. It's essentially what's happening on a chemical level is their brain is addicted to this alcohol. They have these picky eating habits because their pathogens want to be fed. They want to stay alive. They want to thrive. They want to grow. And so it's only natural for them who control the taste buds to only crave sugary, carby things. They have a mind of their own, and this is why kids will often just crave sugar, just crave carbs. I would actually argue this is more common than you would think. I think any kid's real craving for carbs and sugar is very likely yeast overgrowth to some degree. But when you have an autistic individual, you're seeing this to very extreme degrees. This is why part of the answer is going to be strategically reducing the foods in their diet that feed the yeast, Obviously easier said than done. Slowly, you would do this very slowly, very gently over time as you incorporate other healing foods that are going to attack the root cause. And I'm going to share more about exactly how to do that in a minute. But as a recap, you've got high levels of toxicity. You've got pathogens overgrowing to compensate for that toxicity. Those pathogens exhale toxic gases like ethanol into the system. The brain and the rest of the body get affected by these toxic gases. The result is leaky gut and a very imbalanced microbiome that only craves sugar, which then perpetuates the cycle of this problem. The behaviors often get so extreme that the parents will just give in to whatever their child wants. So they're just giving them sugar and carbs and sodas and candy all day long, which then makes this cycle worse and worse and worse. Simply eliminating these foods is often not enough for these individuals that have these symptoms. They often have many, many food intolerances as it is. Often parents will notice how their symptoms are flared up or they're triggered by certain ingredients. It sounds crazy, but it is a little bit like dealing with an addict. And the reason is because it is the same thing on a very chemical level. Their brains are addicted to sugar, and so we have to find a way to actually reverse the root cause. So before I share the first step in healing autism, I want to kind of address the elephant in the room. There's a really common mentality out there with specifically autism. It's the idea that if I propose solutions to this, that I'm somehow saying that there's something wrong with your child. And many, many, many parents want to just believe that their child was born this way, that they were born with special needs, and that any sort of attempt towards healing would be some sort of way of altering their personality, their God-given, innate, who they are type of thing. But I do just want to confront that because it's so common and so pervasive. At the end of the day, we do have to separate their personality and their giftings from what I believe is still a disease. They are suffering from a disease. None of the symptoms that they're experiencing are normal. And I say that with utmost compassion, but we don't need to identify with the illness, take ownership over the illness in an effort to say that their symptoms are valid. Like, their symptoms are valid. Their symptoms are very real, but it would be a disservice of me to not share the actual real solutions with you guys, because I know that there are answers out there, and I've seen it so many times and time again, people reversing autism diagnoses and finding real success and real treatment, and it comes by getting to the root of it. So that being said, number one is going to be that you need probiotics. I've been talking about this the whole time, but there's a really big imbalance in the microbiome of autistic individuals. You've got so much pathogens, so much toxic gases going on. We need to infiltrate the microbiome with probiotics, with beneficial bacteria. This is not as simple as just throwing a pill at them. This needs to be therapeutically dosed probiotics. I teach people how to do this in my Whole Health Blueprint, but you actually need to learn how to therapeutically dose these beneficial microbes into their gut so that they can have a diverse microbiome. They need more beneficial microbes to start to outweigh the pathogens. This in turn is going to kill off the pathogens, and it's going to leave them with a much more robust microbiome. Number two is that you need targeted detox. We need to effectively start removing these toxins. The reason that the pathogens are overgrowing in the first place is because of the toxins. So we need to effectively find ways to remove them gently from the body so that their body isn't having this need for the pathogens to overgrow and to compensate and to act as the cleanup crew of the body. You need to actually support the body's detox. Now, I have so many resources up here on my channel for that. The best thing that I've seen the fastest success with that is just super easy and doesn't need a lot of support is using the zeolite spray. I will have a link for that in the description below. And I will also link my heavy metal toxicity video here on YouTube where I share all about how to chelate heavy metals effectively. But I just recently heard from a mom who has a child who had a really severe speech delay, lots of anxiety, and presenting symptoms that looked like autism. She started the zeolite on her child, and she calls it almost miraculous how fast his speech improved, and many of his other symptoms started to decrease slowly. So this is not like a cure-all for everything, and it doesn't work for everyone. There are other things you can try when that doesn't work, but it is definitely something worth trying if you haven't already. And the third thing is meat stock. Meat stock seals leaky gut, and it also kills off yeast. A really disgusting way to think about it is that it actually decapitates yeast. So if you can think of your gut microbiome like a tube, you've got yeast that have tentacles that are literally growing through the gut wall, causing all these holes and perforations. And meat stock actually decapitates it. It seals the gaps in the gut lining. This is going to calm down the immune response. It's going to kill off pathogens. So you're going to start to see that microbiome naturally start to rebalance. It's got all the collagen, gelatin, and amino acids that are necessary for actual repair of the villi, which, if you haven't heard of this analogy before, your entire digestive system is kind of like a shaggy rug. If you lay it out, it's got these villi, and when there's damage to the villi, that's when you start to see malabsorption of nutrients and lots of pathogens overgrowing. So we need to repair the villi, and meat stock does just that in probably the most natural way possible. I just let out a meat stock mini course, which teaches you exactly how to do this step by step. I take you through sourcing the meaty bones, making the meat stock, jarring it up, introducing it, and there is a meat stock challenge for those of you who are interested in trying to get it into your diet in a more sustainable way. I give all the information of the benefits and what you need for making it. It's $17, and you guys, it's everything I wish I had when I was first starting out healing my gut. So go ahead and check that out. I'll leave that in the description box below. The reality is over 70% of people with ASD show gastrointestinal disorders. So whether you believe what I'm telling you or not, there is a really strong link between the gut and the brain. And the theory that I believe is that when you shift the microbiome, you can actually start to heal your brain. And so I've seen that happen in my own life, from really severe brain injuries, actually coming completely clear of all my symptoms. But this can happen when you understand the real root cause of autism as well. I talk a lot about gut-related issues on my channel, like diarrhea and constipation and IBS and SIBO and all that type of stuff. But the reality of it is when you have something like autism and you don't present with gastrointestinal disorders, sometimes it's tricky to really believe me when I say that it is a gut issue. But some people do not present traditional gut symptoms that they would see as a problem, but their autism symptoms are still gut related. I really believe that all disease begins in the gut. And so whether or not you believe me, many individuals are seeing great success with their autism symptoms by simply addressing the microbiome. I say simply, but it is not a very easy process. It's really a challenge of addressing the toxicity and the microbiome. Like I said, I'm really committed to this food as medicine approach. If you're ready to jump in and get started, meat stock is square one. It is the first step towards healing any sort of gut issue, autism included. Go ahead and check out my $17 meat stock mini course linked below. I want to help you make it correctly and effectively so that you can actually see results. If you got any value out of this video, like the video. And for more root cause gut health related content, please subscribe to my channel, and we would love to have you here in this community. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.